Silence is often misunderstood. Many people believe that silence means weakness, avoidance, or emptiness. But in reality, silence is a powerful presence. When you stay silent, you are not losing. You are observing, you are listening, and you are allowing life to unfold without force. Just as nature does not rush yet everything is accomplished, silence teaches us the same lesson. A tree does not struggle to grow, the river does not fight to flow, and the seasons do not resist their change. They all happen naturally. In our daily lives, we are constantly pushed to react, to respond, to prove, to argue, and to chase. But sometimes the most powerful response is no response. When you cultivate silence, you begin to discover clarity. You allow things to come to you, instead of exhausting yourself by running after them. The answers you seek, the peace you desire, and the strength you long for. All of them arise naturally when the mind is still, when the heart is calm, and when the tongue chooses silence. So let us explore how staying silent is not about doing nothing, but about allowing everything to come at the right time, in the right way, naturally. Silence is one of the greatest teachers, yet it is the most overlooked. In a world filled with constant noise, distractions, and the pressure to always be seen or heard, we forget the strength that lies in stillness. People often misunderstand silence as emptiness or weakness, but in truth, it is a form of wisdom that does not need to announce itself. The ability to stay silent is not about being passive. It is about creating space for life to unfold naturally, without unnecessary interference. It is in silence that we discover clarity, and it is through clarity that the right actions and opportunities naturally arise. Think of a seed resting beneath the soil. The seed does not struggle. It does not force itself to grow faster than its time. It simply remains in silence, in darkness, yet within that stillness a natural transformation is taking place. Slowly, roots extend downward, anchoring the seed. Then, when the time is right, a sprout emerges above the ground and begins to grow toward the sunlight. This entire process happens without noise, without resistance, and without rush. Nature shows us through the seed that silence is not inactivity. It is preparation, it is growth, it is the quiet alignment of energy that allows something greater to manifest at the right moment. But as human beings, we are rarely comfortable with silence. We feel the need to speak when words are not necessary, to react when patience would be wiser, to control when surrender would be more powerful. Silence, however, is not about absence. It is about presence. It is the presence of awareness that watches before responding, that listens before speaking, that allows rather than forces. When we practice silence, we learn to step back and observe life instead of being consumed by every impulse and distraction. In that space, our true strength begins to reveal itself. The river does not rush impatiently to reach the ocean. It flows naturally, carving its path, bending around obstacles, yet never losing its direction. In silence, we too can learn to flow like the river, trusting that everything we seek is already moving toward us in its own time. To force things is to create resistance, but to stay silent is to open ourselves to natural alignment. The moment we stop chasing and start allowing, life has the space to bring us what we need. This is not laziness, it is harmony. It is the deep trust that what belongs to you will find you when you are ready to receive it. Silence also teaches us patience. In moments of conflict, silence prevents us from saying words that cannot be taken back. In times of confusion, silence allows the mind to settle like muddy water that clears once it is left undisturbed. When we remain silent, we create the inner conditions for wisdom to emerge naturally. Just as you cannot see your reflection in a disturbed lake, you cannot see truth in a restless mind. Silence becomes the mirror that reveals what is real, what is necessary, and what is aligned with your path. Many people confuse silence with suppression, but true silence is not about suppressing emotions or thoughts. It is about observing them without being controlled by them. When anger rises, you stay silent not to deny it, but to understand it. When fear whispers, you stay silent not to avoid it, but to see its nature clearly. In that silence, emotions lose their power to dictate your actions, and you regain mastery over yourself. This is why silence is often linked with strength. Because the one who can stay silent in the face of provocation, the one who does not rush to react, is the one who is truly in control. In silence, we also learn to listen. Not just to others, but to life itself. We hear the subtle lessons that are drowned out by constant chatter. We notice the small details, the gentle nudges, the signs that guide us in the right direction. Life is always speaking to us, but its voice is soft. Only in silence do we begin to hear it clearly. This is why so many ancient traditions value meditation, solitude, and reflection, because in stillness, we connect with wisdom that cannot be found in noise. Silence is the foundation for natural growth. Just as the sun does not force its light yet everything blooms under it, just as the moon does not demand attention, yet the tides follow its pull, silence does not impose yet it influences deeply. The more we practice silence, the more we align ourselves with the natural rhythm of life, where everything unfolds without force, without resistance, and exactly at the right time. When we talk about silence, it is not just the absence of words, but the cultivation of an inner state where the mind is no longer restless. In our everyday life, we are constantly engaged with thoughts, with endless conversations in the mind that never seem to stop. We rehearse what has already happened, replaying past mistakes, or we project ourselves into the future, worrying about what has not yet arrived. This constant mental noise consumes our energy. We begin to feel as though we are running in circles. Silence, however, is the way out of this endless cycle. It is the art of pausing, of creating space within ourselves so that we are no longer trapped by the noise of the mind. Imagine standing by a lake on a windy day. The surface is disturbed, waves ripple across, and no reflection can be seen. If you drop something into the lake, it disappears beneath the surface, hidden from view. Now imagine the wind ceases, the surface becomes calm, and suddenly the water reflects everything around it with clarity. This is what happens when silence enters the mind. The noise, the agitation, the restlessness begin to settle, and with that stillness, clarity arises. Thoughts no longer dominate us. Instead, we see them for what they are. Passing movements, temporary waves. And from that clarity, decisions and actions begin to come more naturally. Many people struggle in life, not because they lack opportunities or potential, but because they are overwhelmed by noise. They cannot distinguish between what is truly important and what is simply distraction. Silence sharpens this distinction. By staying silent, both externally and internally, we begin to notice the difference between what nourishes us and what drains us. We stop rushing after every thought, every impulse, every demand from the outside world, and instead, we allow life to slow down enough for truth to reveal itself. There is a saying that flowers do not bloom by forcing themselves. They open when the conditions are right, with sunlight, water, and time. The same applies to our lives. Many times we push, we force, we chase, believing that only through constant effort will things move forward. Yet often, the harder we push, the more resistance we create. Silence teaches us to trust the timing of life, just like the flower that blooms naturally when the moment arrives. In silence, we do not stop working, we do not stop living, but we learn to act with alignment rather than desperation. Actions taken from silence are steady, calm, and powerful, while actions taken from restlessness are scattered and fragile. Another dimension of silence is its ability to heal. When the body is tired, it needs rest. When the mind is tired, it needs silence. Just as sleep restores the body, silence restores the mind and the spirit. But because many people are addicted to noise, to constant stimulation, they rarely give themselves the gift of silence. The result is exhaustion, confusion, and emotional imbalance. By cultivating moments of silence each day, even a few minutes, we give ourselves the space to recover. We begin to see that silence is not an absence of life, but the very source of life's renewal. Silence is also a form of strength in relationships. When conflicts arise, silence prevents escalation. When misunderstandings occur, silence gives space for clarity to emerge. Many times, arguments are fueled not by truth, but by the need to be heard, to be right, to dominate. But when one chooses silence, the cycle of conflict is interrupted. This does not mean avoiding communication. It means choosing to listen first, to respond with awareness instead of reacting from emotion. In this way, silence becomes a bridge that reconnects rather than a wall that divides. It is important to understand that silence is not something external we must search for. It already exists within us, waiting to be uncovered. Beneath all the noise of thought, beneath all the emotions that rise and fall, silence is always present. Just like the sky remains untouched no matter how many clouds pass through it, silence remains untouched beneath the turbulence of the mind. By turning inward, by practicing awareness, we return to that silence that was always there. From this place, everything begins to feel more natural. Decisions become clearer, actions become effortless, and life flows with greater ease. Silence also cultivates humility. In silence, we realize that not everything requires our interference. Not everything requires our voice, our opinion, or our control. Life has its own intelligence, its own rhythm, and when we step back, we begin to witness that intelligence in action. The tree knows how to grow, the tide knows how to rise, the bird knows when to migrate. In the same way, our lives too are guided by a deeper intelligence, but it can only be perceived when the noise quiets down. Silence is the doorway to that perception. To stay silent does not mean to withdraw from life, nor does it mean to avoid responsibility or retreat from challenges. Silence, when practiced with awareness, is a way to move deeper into life rather than away from it. It is a reminder that not everything requires our immediate reaction, not every question requires an answer, and not every situation needs to be controlled. When we learn to embrace silence, we begin to discover that the natural order of life has a rhythm of its own, and when we align ourselves with it, things begin to flow in a way that feels effortless. Human beings often believe that progress only comes through constant action, through speaking, doing, and striving. Yet when we look to nature, we see that much of what is most powerful happens in stillness. The mountain does not move, yet it influences the weather and shapes the land around it. The stars remain silent in the sky, yet they guide travelers, inspire poets, and mark the passage of time. Even the breath, which sustains our life, enters and leaves the body quietly, without demand for attention. Silence is woven into the very fabric of existence, and when we cultivate it, we begin to move closer to truth. One of the most valuable aspects of silence is its power to transform our perception. When we are caught up in constant noise, our senses become dull. We overlook the details, we miss the subtleties, we lose awareness of what is present in this very moment. But in silence, the senses awaken. We begin to notice the sound of the wind through the trees, the rhythm of our own heartbeat, the way thoughts rise and fall like waves. These small awakenings bring us closer to ourselves and closer to the reality of life as it truly is, not as we imagine it to be. Silence also strengthens discipline. It requires effort to resist the impulse to always speak, to always react, to always explain ourselves. Choosing silence teaches us self-mastery. It trains us to recognize that power does not come from proving something to others, but from being steady within ourselves. In silence, we learn that validation is not necessary, approval is not essential, and arguments do not define truth. The more we practice silence, the more independent we become from the need for external recognition. This is not isolation, but freedom. The freedom to live aligned with inner wisdom rather than outer noise. In many traditions, silence is seen as a form of meditation. When we sit in silence, when we allow thoughts to rise and fall without chasing them, we begin to discover that there is a deeper layer beneath the surface of the mind. Just like the ocean, whose surface may be turbulent, while its depths remain still, the human mind also has depths of stillness that can only be touched in silence. In this stillness, we realize that peace does not come from changing the world outside, but from quieting the world within. And once that inner peace is cultivated, the outer world naturally begins to reflect it. Silence also reveals truth in human relationships. When we listen in silence, we hear more than just words. We hear intentions, emotions, and unspoken realities. Many people speak without truly saying anything, and many truths are never spoken out loud. But silence creates space for those truths to be felt, to be understood beyond language. In a conversation, silence is not a weakness but a gift, because it allows space for understanding to grow. When we stop filling every pause with noise, we realize that sometimes the deepest connection comes not from speaking, but from being present in silence with another. There is also a spiritual dimension to silence. Throughout history, sages, monks, and seekers have sought silence not as an escape, but as a path to higher understanding. They discovered that in silence, the ego begins to fade, and something greater takes its place. In silence, we remember that we are not separate from life, but part of it. The river flows, the wind moves, the stars shine, and we too are expressions of the same natural order. This realization does not come from books or speeches, but from silence, from allowing life to reveal itself directly without interference. In silence, we also learn patience with ourselves. Many people are harsh on themselves, constantly criticizing, constantly striving, constantly feeling that they are not enough. But silence softens this harshness. When we stay silent, we begin to observe ourselves with compassion, without judgment, without rushing to fix or change. We begin to see that growth is not a race, that healing is not achieved by force, and that transformation unfolds naturally when we allow space for it. Silence becomes the soil in which patience, kindness, and acceptance take root. Silence is often perceived as an absence, yet in truth, it is a presence. It carries a depth that words can rarely capture, and it holds a strength that does not need to be shown. When we learn to stay silent, we begin to understand that life unfolds with or without our interference. The more we try to push, the more resistance we encounter, but the more we remain silent, the more we notice how events and circumstances align naturally. Silence is not about stepping away from life, but about stepping into harmony with the rhythm of life itself. When we remain silent, we begin to see how much of our energy is wasted on unnecessary speech and reaction. Countless times, people speak not to share wisdom, but to fill space. Not to solve problems, but to prove themselves right. Words become a weapon when silence could have been a shield. The discipline to remain quiet when the impulse to react is strong is a sign of maturity. In that quietness, we reclaim control over ourselves, and we begin to direct our energy toward growth rather than conflict. Silence also brings us closer to truth. Noise often distorts reality, creating confusion where clarity should exist. When we are constantly surrounded by voices, opinions, and judgments, it becomes difficult to distinguish between what is real and what is illusion. In silence, however, illusions fall away. The mind, no longer occupied with defending itself or projecting into the future, begins to see things as they are. This kind of clarity cannot be forced. It arises naturally when space is given. Just as the dust in water settles when the jar is left untouched, truth reveals itself when the mind is left in silence. Nature reminds us of this principle over and over again. The sun rises each morning without noise, yet it gives life to everything. The moon moves silently across the night sky, yet it governs the tides. A tree grows in silence, a flower blooms in silence, and the cycle of life continues without a single word. We, too, are part of this natural order. When we force, we step out of rhythm, but when we embrace silence, we realign ourselves with the flow of life. From this alignment, Things begin to fall into place without struggle. Silence also sharpens our awareness. It allows us to listen deeply, not only to others but to ourselves and to the life that surrounds us. In silence, the smallest details become visible. The way the wind moves through the leaves, the steady beat of the heart, the thoughts that rise and dissolve. These observations are not trivial, they are reminders of the present moment. When we are silent, we live more fully in the present. And it is in the present that life happens, not in the regrets of the past or the worries of the future. Another gift of silence is its ability to cultivate inner strength. The one who can remain silent in the face of provocation demonstrates more power than the one who reacts with loudness and aggression. It is easy to shout, to argue, to defend, but it requires strength to hold back, to observe, and to respond only when necessary. This kind of strength does not rely on force, it relies on discipline. Silence becomes a training ground for self-mastery, and through it, we learn to act from wisdom instead of impulse. There is also healing in silence. When we create moments of quiet, we allow the mind and body to rest. The nervous system, which is constantly triggered by external demands, finds peace in silence. Just as muscles grow stronger in rest after exertion, the mind grows clearer and more resilient after silence. Healing does not always come from doing more. Often, it comes from allowing stillness. Within that stillness, wounds begin to close, emotions begin to balance, and the heart regains its strength. In silence, we also learn humility. We realize that not every situation requires our opinion, that not every question requires our answer, that not every challenge requires our control. Life has its own intelligence, and often the wisest thing we can do is to step back and let that intelligence work. This is not passivity but trust, a deep trust that what is meant for us will arrive, and what is not meant for us will pass. Silence gives us the patience to wait for the right moment, rather than forcing the wrong one. Silence is not emptiness, it is fullness. It is not weakness, it is strength. When we stay silent, we allow life to move through us instead of against us. We learn that not everything requires noise, not everything requires effort, and not everything requires force. Just as rivers find the ocean without rushing, just as flowers bloom without struggle, we too can discover that what belongs to us will come when we are ready. Through silence, we see more clearly, we act more wisely, and we grow more naturally. It is in silence that the mind finds clarity, the heart finds peace, and the spirit finds balance. By staying silent, we are not doing less. We are allowing more. We are opening ourselves to the rhythm of life, trusting that everything will unfold as it should, in its own time, in its own way. So, let silence be your teacher, your strength, and your guide. Stay silent, and you will see that everything you seek, everything you hope for, and everything you are meant to be will come naturally.